So today I'm going to talk to you guys about our NJADAPT program, specifically addressing the need for tools and visualizations to plan for climate change in New Jersey. We are part of what's called the New Jersey Climate Change Resource Center. This was created by state statute in January of 2020 with the goal of creating and supporting the use of impartial and actionable science to advance government, public, private, and new non-governmental sector efforts to adapt to and mitigate and change to a changing climate. And we do this primarily through conducting research with real-world applications in New Jersey, creating planning tools, and developing technical guidance to help communities use that science in actionable ways, and connecting researchers with those policymakers and planners to help create those connections and make those science actionable. A little bit about the office I'm a part of. So, like you said, I'm with the Office of Research Analytics. We're on part of the School of Environmental and Biological Sciences at Rutgers, and also the New Jersey Agricultural Experiment Station, which has basically a mission of research, education, and extension throughout the state of New Jersey. And our office primarily deals with providing different types of advanced statistical, spatial, economic, and technological tools to projects and programs throughout the experiment station as well as the broader university. We do have expertise in GIS and developing interactive web mapping and data applications. And we collaborate with experts and stakeholders to help develop those tools to meet that mission of our experiment station. So the NJADAPT suite of tools were developed to address identified gaps in communicating climate science and data to policymakers, planners, and the broader public. If you go to the Climate Change Resource Center's website, which I'll show the links at the end, we have our NJADAPT program there. And on the right here, you can see you can access all of the tools that we have available, which I'll be walking us through today and kind of talking about more in general. So as part of this program, what we try to do is trying to figure out, what are the needs across the state and what can we do to help address those needs. So, one of the first things that comes up is, how can we educate the public on the general science of climate change? A lot of people don't understand, what's going on in terms of science of climate change, what the projections are in terms of different types of factors, in terms of temperature and climate and precipitation. And so to address that, we started developing what we call our climate dashboards. These are meant to be high-level, statewide, interactive tools that allow you to kind of see the projected trends for things such as temperature at different times of the year, precipitation levels, and a few other different factors, and allows you to basically look at, okay, what are the projections under different types of climate scenarios, and what are the projections for different time periods? So we can kind of understand what is our changing climate in New Jersey meant to look like. So this right here, I believe this is a example. This is looking at seasonal maximum temperatures at kind of a mid-century, 2040 to 2060. You can see, it's a little hard to see, there's a highlighted section in the middle of the graph kind of showing that time section. You can see the trend. And we do also provide kind of the bounds to this. When you deal with climate data, there's a bunch of different models that get created at a regional level, each of them with different inputs into them and different types of caveats and factors that go into them. And so we basically provide this range to show, okay, this is the range of all the models, and this is kind of our average that we're looking at that we kind of try and base everything off of. One of the next questions we built is how can we help communities visualize the impacts of coastal and inland flood hazards on their infrastructure, their people, and the resources? This is actually where the NJADAPT program initially was birthed. This came out during the Chris Christie administration. There was not a lot of work being done at the state level in terms of the impacts of climate change, especially on the coastal areas of the state yet. And so our group at Rutgers had started off with the creation of what we call NJ Flood Mapper. And this was really meant to help bridge that gap. If you were either, a small organization or township or community that didn't have their own dedicated GIS resources, a lot of people didn't understand, well, what does 3 feet of sea level rise actually look like in terms of the impacts on New Jersey and its communities? And so Flood Mapper was developed to help people visualize those impacts and understand how they might impact the different resources and assets they have in their townships and their communities. And so here's this is a picture showing, here. Can't tell exactly, sorry, but it's looking at New Jersey power plants in New Jersey and looking at some of the flood impacts that could affect power plants. So I'm going to once I go through kind of the tools today, I'm going to give you guys kind of a live demo and show you some of the tools so you can see some of the different things that we can do with them. One of the more recent additions to NJ Flood Mapper that we've incorporated is what we call our total water level approach and the accompanying tool that goes along with it. What came out from one of the science and technical advisory reports that came out a few years back was that we're not just concerned about the impacts of, say, sea level rise. We have to think about what looks like when we have storm events that occur on top of that sea level rise in the future. And so what we do is we kind of consider this as a total water. What's our new high tide, and what does an additional flooding event look like on top of that high tide when we're looking at coastal areas? and also now more recently looking at riverine areas as well. And so with the tool we've created so far, it allows you to walk you through a process of thinking about, okay, what's the area I'm interested in? What's the time period I'm looking at? And then what are the probabilities of different sea level rise events occurring? And then there are different types of flooding events that occur on top of that sea level rise. And so on the bottom right here, you can see we can select different types of flood events. We have kind of your standard ones looking at everything from an annual storm to a 100-year storm. And then we've also incorporated data on historical events. So for a person who may not really be able to visualize, well, what does a 50-year storm or 100-year storm look like? I remember what Hurricane Sandy was like, or Hurricane Irene. And you can actually pull up the data from that historical event, and it'll basically create your total water level based on that to see what that would look like in the future under a climate change scenario. Well, another question that we try to address is how can we make climate change impact analysis more easily accessible? And so one of the ways we've tried to address this is what we call our climate snapshot tools. And what basically this does is provides printable, accessible, interactive reports that basically provide a certain level of flood analysis and climate change impact analysis at various geographies throughout the state. So you can actually run a report at the state level, you can run a report at the county level, and you can run a report down at the municipal level to find out what your impacts might be. And so in this case, we have a bunch of different snapshots looking at different impacts. We have ones looking at impacts on infrastructure, critical facilities, natural and working lands, socially vulnerable populations, things of that nature, and public health. And so each report you can see here, you have the ability to print the report as a PDF. You can also download all the underlying data behind the report. And it provides embedded maps and interactive graphs and tables to kind of show those impacts. So on the top right here, you can see critical assets within the FEMA flood zone. And so for this municipality, we can look at how many hospitals, how many schools, how many fire stations are within the 1% annual chance flood area versus the 0.2% annual chance flood area. Here's an additional part of some of these snapshots. We include embedded maps. And with each of the maps, we also provide, you can see the red buttons there. These are links that take you back to our live tools to allow you to interact with those maps and do further analysis if you want. So you can see kind of an initial map showing the flood levels and some of those assets, but then you can go in and zoom in on specific areas through the interactive Vector Flood Mapper, which it'll take you directly to. One of the newer areas we are getting at more is how can we help communicate the potential impacts of climate change on the public health and populations that may be at high risk in New Jersey. We have a new tool that's set to be released hopefully in the next few weeks called New Jersey Public Health Adapt. This is specifically designed to look at the potential climate change impacts on the public health of New Jersey. It's again set up kind of like a snapshot report style. You can actually run it at the state, county, or municipal level. And it embeds a bunch of different sub-reports that kind of get at that aspect of climate change impacts on health. So we have a section that specifically looks at climate impacts, climate conditions that impact health, such as on the right-hand side here. This is a map showing land surface temperatures in July from 2022. You can use this to help identify potential areas where you may have these heat island effects. We have the radiation effects from the heat off the impervious cover in a lot of the more urban areas of our state. We also have reports that look at specifically at the demographics. So the one on the left here is the social demographic factors that put them at greater risk of negative health outcomes because of climate change. So looking at things such as income levels of populations, people of color, things like that may have a greater risk factors when we're involved when speaking about climate change impacts. Another important part of our public health adapt was the creation of the statewide heat vulnerability index. So this was done with some of the researchers at Rutgers. Basically, we looked at 3 different components of heat vulnerability: exposure, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity. You can see some of the factors listed there that go into each of those. And what was done was we created basically indexed analyses across all of the census tracts across the state. So we have sub-municipal level data in most cases. And so we have indexes for each of these components, and then we have an overall index that provides an overall heat vulnerability measure for those areas within the state. And these can help to, try to identify areas of concern with regard to heat going forward in the future. And we've also incorporated ways to overlay things such as like the NJADAPT's overburdened community data set. Along with this, you can see, okay, where are areas of high risk and places of overburden that are considered overburdened in terms of environmental justice. Some of the other tools we've been developing also are try to address the question of how can we inform different stakeholder groups on the impacts of climate change to their sectors. One of the earlier tools we developed was called NJ Forest Adapt. This specifically looks at the climate change impacts on the forestry sector in New Jersey. It's a lot of the data sets we have here are at a more regional level, since New Jersey is such a small state, and a lot of the impacts on forestry expand much beyond New Jersey's borders. So for instance, in the top right corner there, this is actually a map showing the potential change to specific species of tree due to climate change in the future. So we can actually see which areas are projected to be more or less suitable for those tree species going forward. These can be important information points for people who are looking to plant new trees in different areas to understand what trees actually may be survivable in 50 years versus not. We've also included data such as carbon sequence, not precipitation, sorry, total carbon, the total carbon both above ground and below ground, things like that, measures across the state. We also have data looking at risks to forestry, such as wildfire, fuel hazard, and things of that nature. There are a lot of different data sets in here from various state and federal resources. And we've also included a snapshot tool to this that can provide a forestry snapshot for your municipality and also give context in terms of the broader county that you belong to. And we have one that also focuses on climate impacts related to forestry. Another area in terms of like specific sectors that we have been doing work on in terms of the impacts of climate change is the agricultural sector in New Jersey. This was an analysis that we conducted using some of the data sets that we've been using regarding sea level rise and the effects of sea level rise on the state. We specifically looked at the impacts on farmland, what we consider, they call property class 3A and 3B. These are assessed farmland properties in New Jersey. The map on the left shows the specific impact from 2 feet of sea level rise. You can see the number of properties and basically the color coding results in the proportion of those properties that are impacted by the inundation from that level of sea level rise. But then, we took it a step further. It's like, well, sea level rise is not always just the issue. In a lot of these areas, we have a lot of wetlands and marsh area, and sea level rise is going to cause conversion and change and modification of those wetlands areas. And so what happens is, you can see in the center one here, this is the marsh migration data set that's been created to kind of look at how marshes are going to change due to 2 feet of sea level rise in the future. And then we can look at that on the right here to see what's the total impact on farm properties in the southwest region of New Jersey that would have either permanent inundation or have some amount of wetlands and marshland now on their properties. And it can be quite significant. And then we've been also trying to work with our state partners to look at, okay, can some of these analyses be incorporated in things such as the Farmland Preservation Program? If you're going to be using state tax dollars to permanently preserve farmland, we should probably be thinking about where those farms are located and what the potential impacts of climate change may be on those farm properties in the future. This is the final one I have. One of the questions we also try to address is, how do we provide detailed climate hazard analysis for planners to meet state and federal requirements? So we've started developing, in partnership with the New Jersey Office of Emergency Management, what we call NJADAPT. This is specifically a tool designed to help in the development of hazard mitigation plans for both municipalities and counties across the state. This is really meant to provide detailed flood hazard and climate hazard analysis that can be incorporated into these plans. And so they consist of a bunch of different factors. We have things such as flood hazard analysis of critical infrastructure within your communities. We also have a heat hazard analysis, which looks at the future projections for heat waves within your county, and basically the number of those that are projected to occur and the length that they're expected to last. We have also data sets looking specifically at social vulnerability and their impacts from different types of flooding events. And then the final thing we have is a Mod 4 parcel flood analysis. We've basically done flooding analysis for all 3 million plus records of parcels across the entire state of New Jersey, and basically able to provide you with basically a proportion of those parcels that are flooded from everywhere from 0 to 20 feet of total water level and the FEMA flood zones. Here's some examples, some of the output from that tool. On the left here is I believe this is our People Mobility Index, showing basically how you can click on interactive map and pull up specific areas. This is looking at Camden City, and you can see basically the breakout of the different factors that went into that heat vulnerability index. So you can see specifically which variables are contributing to that high level and get the breakdowns there. On the right, this is another analysis that's embedded in there that basically looks at, we have data sets looking at canopy cover and impervious cover throughout the state. And basically what we'll be able to do is kind of create a proportional analysis to look at what areas are at higher risk of heat island effects because they have very low canopy cover and very high impervious cover within those areas. And so in this map, the darker brown areas are areas where we have a much higher impervious cover ratio, and the dark green areas are areas we have much higher canopy cover ratio. And then what's, you can't maybe see in the legend here, but the crosshatch sections are basically those areas identified as overburden communities throughout the state. So it allows you to kind of find those specific areas that may be at risk that you may want to focus on in terms of something like an urban tree planting program. And on the bottom here, this is just some of the output from our heat wave analysis, kind of showing for different climate scenarios and different time periods. Basically, the current threshold and annual, the average number of heat waves that occur, and then showing it projected out and giving kind of a balance for like the 10 to 90%, like what the most likely range is for some of those to occur. This is just to kind of show something that can be done with some of the Mod 4 parcel analysis that we've done. Since this includes all the data that's associated from the Division of Taxation with all the taxable parcels in the state, in addition to the flooding data, we can break it out looking at different types of property classes within a specific county or municipality to see what's the potential impact to those different types of properties throughout the state. So this is looking at where we are now in Warren County. And you can see basically with properties within the 1% annual chance flood zone and the 0.2% annual chance flood zone, which is the 100 and 500 year flood zones, and basically providing the number of properties and the total acreage that are impacted. And so you can kind of look at things such as farmland or vacant land or publicly owned land if you're looking at things such as open space. And all this data too is the parcel analysis data includes what we call the PAMS pin, which allows you, if you do your own internal GIS analysis, you can basically link this data directly in GIS to your parcel layer and basically map any of this data that you want to use. So another thing that we do at the Climate Change Resource Center that's a big component is our outreach and training. We do conduct training sessions with different stakeholder groups, with professional planners, and they are able to get AICP credits through that, state and local law officials, as well as with nonprofits and NGOs. We also have a program called the Climate Corps. This actually takes graduate students from all different disciplines and engages them in actual ground projects that employ the use of climate science, and that also help us inform the creation of our tools. So we do things such as creating story maps to document the climate impacts to critical and community assets, such as hospitals and health systems. They also help municipalities assess their vulnerability to flooding impacts. We've done about a dozen specific municipalities to date. And they also help support our efforts to strengthen the state's managed retreat programs. And we also do regular outreach to our state agencies and professional organizations to try and get feedback and tools about our future needs, including such as me being here today and talking to the Northwest New Jersey Rivers Conference. I just want to talk a little briefly about some things that are in development. We do have some new data and applications that are being released. We've developed some new riverine flooding models. This is an area that we know has been kind of lacking in New Jersey. There's been a lot of work on the coastal side, looking at coastal flooding, and there's not a lot of great data looking at the riverine flooding across the state. And so we've worked with some of our researchers in the engineering department at Rutgers to develop what it's called the height above nearest drainage, or HAND model. This is developed from Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And basically, it was a modeling technique that was vetted by a scientific advisory panel and provides baseline flood data for 1 to 15 foot flood scenarios, which we've actually incorporated into our flood mapper tool currently. And then we've also been working on developing model flood data for average and maximum flood events based on historical river gauge data, and including the additional 10 up to 50% additional flooding due to climate change in the future. So we're working on incorporating that in the next few months. We're also working on an extreme rainfall precipitation tool. This actually is in conjunction with the tool that was recently released by our New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. And this basically provides the ability to project potential increases in extreme rainfall events from modeled climate data in two different ways. A user can either provide a rainfall amount and find out the projected return period of that type of scenario. So if you know a recent storm event in your town received 12 inches of rain within a 24-hour period, you want to find out how much more frequently is an event like that going to occur 50 years from now. This tool will be able to provide that information to you. You can also take a return period storm and find out how much more severe the rainfall is going to be from that. So, what our current 100-year storm events might be now in terms of rainfall, you can find out what a 100-year storm in 50 years, 30 years, how much more rain is projected to occur because of those types of storms. And so I'll show the presentation will be filled with everyone to hear some of the links to get to some of these resources. Time. All right. So I'd actually like to open up for any questions right now, and then we have enough time that I was going to pull up some of the tools and we do some live demos and show you kind of how we use them in some different ways you can use the tools for maybe some of the work that you're interested in.
So are all those links available under NJADAPT?
Yep. So if you go to njadapt.org, you can basically, that takes you right to our Climate Change Resource Center webpage with the links to all the tools right there. So that's the easiest way to get to everything, but we like to provide some of the individual links for those who might be interested in them. Yeah. Yes.
Is there 2 questions?
Sure.
Is it better to use these applications on like a computer or laptop and not your phone?
In many of the cases, yes. Just because we're dealing interactive maps and stuff, it can be a little tricky on the smaller phone screen to work with them. They do work on tablets and phones, but the usually like a laptop computer can be a little better experience in some cases. Some of the report ones work fine on the phone, but yeah, like NJ Flood Mapper is really more of a you need a little bit of a bigger screen usually to work with that one.
Yeah. Or I guess what would possible solution be when you showed the picture of the house and then you showed in the future where the sea level rise will be, and then on top of the flood level, if the person was like still going to be living there, would they just like move their house everywhere, or would they just leave?
So that's a big planning decision that has to be done at the municipal level, because that's why we have things such as the Blue Acres program. They're looking to buy properties and turn them into natural habitat to help maybe reduce the impact of some of that flooding in the future. But yeah, because when you use the tool and you put that on, you'll see that there are entire townships that 50 to 60% of the town is now underwater. So it's not simply a matter of moving the house back. It's like, what do we do with the entire town in terms of trying to mitigate against this in the future, or have some kind of managed retreat program or things like that. Yeah. Yes.
Salinization a problem with the water?
Salinization, yes. So that is something that's come up a lot, especially in the agricultural sector, where people are starting to experience saltwater intrusion into their fresh water supplies. It is something, as far as I know, I'm not a hydrologist, so I don't understand necessarily the science behind it, but I know it's something that's fairly difficult to model. Not that I'm aware of. So I would have to go back and check with some people who are have more research and experience in that area than I do.
Is there a corollary to this, or in Pennsylvania, maybe your kind of state that you're aware of? I'm trying to get a picture, a regional picture. This is really good.
Thank you. Not that I'm aware of. There are some states, so California has CalAdapt, which is somewhat similar, and they have a lot of similar types of applications as well for California. I want to say I think Massachusetts has one. They have one as well. They've been working on a similar. Yeah, and we actually just got contacted by Maryland recently because they're doing a similar effort in Maryland, and they wanted to know more about how we developed our tools so they could try and do something similar down there. So
Delaware maybe too?
possibly, yeah.
New York City.
New York City has a lot of great tools, yeah, but they also have like more money than God. Yeah. So, but if you have people who are contacts there, we're always happy to collaborate and work to help other states develop similar platforms. Like I said, we're state universities, so we're always looking to partner with other state universities to help.
Yeah. There's some tools out there, but they're like there's the priorities for climate change, and it's not.
Yeah.
It's not as complete. This is really.
Yeah. Yeah. And the one thing I will mention too is so that, what we try and, we understand there are a lot of different efforts across the state and through different organizations trying to do similar things. So we try and make all of our data sets publicly accessible. So they can be either easily pulled into other tools. They can be used by other people for other purposes. So if you're just a desktop GIS user, we have access so you can pull all the GIS data into your desktop GIS and use it as you want and as you might need.
How often are your shape files updated for, let's say, the carbon sequestration?
So it depends on the data set usually. So in most cases, we are trying to pull data set from like the live map services from the official source of that data. So that as that data gets updated, it's automatically updated by tools. There are certain data sets that that they either don't provide public map services, and we have to download the data and process and prep it, and we have to do that ourselves. Typically, we develop some type of a data management program around, each of those data sets. How often are they updated? How do we need to look into updating them on the tools? So, we do run into some issues where certain data sets are created by certain agencies and then never updated for years. And so we have to make decisions about, okay, how is this data set still valuable going forward? Or do we need to basically sunset it and look for something else? It's a continuous challenge when building tools like this.
And you archive every time you move on to an updated version?
If it's something we're doing internally, yes. But like I said, if it's coming from a live source, that's up to the data generator to provide that. The one thing I'll show in the live demo that we've been working towards too is the ability to pull in external data sets that we may not have included. So right now we have the ability to pull in data sets from any existing map services, where there's something like the New Jersey Open GIS portal, Geographic Information Network portal, sorry. Or if you have ArcGIS.com and you're using it as an organization and you have your own internal data sets, we have the ability for them to pull them into, say, things like Flood Mapper, so that if there's a data set we haven't thought of, or your locality that has, GIS resources in terms of like zoning maps, you want to look at your zoning versus your, flooded risk, you can do that as well. We have started developing some new tools that basically allow you to just log into ArcGIS.com through our applications and have full access to basically all your data sets and just be able to add them right in. But that's coming in a subsequent version down the road. Any other questions? Yeah, John.
Every time I go onto NJADAPT, there's always something new. So I always really love seeing what they're doing next. And it's great resource, and it's cool to be kind of a companion in that mapping world, right?
Definitely.
I'm really interested in, maybe it's a little bit more technical than, but the riverine flood models and the relationship to the new flood rules, because that's a big question. Anybody really map those flood rules?
We are doing it right now.
Is what you have on your mapping for your water quality mapping, is that?
So that's a
version of it?
That's a version of it. So so just to give a little background. So New Jersey passed an inland flood rule this past year, basically saying for most planning efforts, they want you to look at the 100-year flood zone plus an additional 3 feet of flooding across the state in terms of like the area of risk. The issue with that is when they made that rule, no one really bothered to think about how difficult that actually is to do in terms of mapping and developing that type of stuff. So Richard Lathrop, who's one of the faculty members at Rutgers, we've been working with him to develop basically a layer to help inform at least municipalities to some extent of what this might look like for your town. We had an initial version that I believe was made public through the New Jersey Water Resources Institute's web mapping platform, and I can provide links to that. But over the summer, we've refined that methodology, and we have a new version that we're basically actually sending to DEP to have them review it, just give their kind of blessing on it before we make it public, hopefully within the next month or so.
Do you know if DEP is planning to map it themselves? They are not.
As far as I know, and that's why they've been like all very happy that we've been willing to take it on, because this was the big concern.
And then in my mind, if it's FEMA +3, the FEMA flood zone areas are not all the same elevation throughout the polygon,
which is why
so where's +3?
Exactly.
And how do you do that with DEM? So I'm just fascinated by that, because I think it's an interesting role.
Yeah.
How do you map it in a way that is providing the information that the rules intended to do?
Yeah, that was the biggest challenge. I mean, we're looking at flood zones where you have one end of a flood zone, the other is a 30 to 50 foot difference between the two. It's like, well, how do you add 3 feet to that? Because it's constantly changing.
And where is the 3 feet from?
Yeah, so we've really probably pushed the limits of what we could try to figure out how to do this. I think the plan forward is that basically what we release will be considered a planning and informational layer. Like it should not be being used in any type of regulatory manner, but it's meant for like municipalities to be able to think about what areas of my town are impacted by this potentially. And then with the DEP rule, it's really meant to be more of a site specific. Okay, you're getting a permit to do something on this parcel of land. When you're looking at the parcel level, usually those flood zones are small enough that it's a lot easier to do that. Okay, an engineer can easily do the +3 and figure out what's in, what's out. And that's like my understanding is that's how it's going to kind of try and move forward.
It probably though should for this particular data set be something that there's a collaboration on things like it, because if you start having different versions of this, that could be quite confusing.
Yes, no, I agree. Yeah,
I would love to keep this conversation going.
Yeah, and I'd actually like to send you what we've worked on and get your input on it and get your feedback on it, because like I said, we've been kind of passing it around internally at Rutgers saying, hey, does this make sense to you? It's look, it's
we looked at it and it was
it's daunting.
There was too many unknowns.
The initial one we put out was kind of a quick and dirty. Okay, we found a tool we can kind of do a real rough estimation of it, but we found that there was like some deficiencies in that, so we tried to refine it over the summer. Well, we found in most cases it roughly correlated to the 500-year floodplain in a lot of areas. So that was kind of a rough kind of estimate you could kind of use in a pinch. just to get an idea.
The other one that was really connecting to me, do you have your tree canopy and your impervious surface data set? What are you using for a tree canopy?
So that's all coming from, so it's all coming from the National Land Cover data set. They have an impervious cover data set, and the tree canopy covers for the entire contiguous US. It's raster based, and basically each cell provides an estimation of the proportion of that area that's either impervious or canopy cover. And so
what's this grid size?
I want to say 30 meters. I think so, roughly. I could be, don't quote me on that, but I believe that's what it is. It's pretty fun. I mean, you can go down to like within a municipality and see the canopy cover, like, like pretty well within a municipality level. So, and so when we did, like I said, so you have the ability to do that at a much finer level, which we're probably going to be working on. For now, we just did it at that like census block group, census tract level to align with the Oberlin community data set. So we want to kind of link those together.
It seems like it's the kind of data set that you needed a different resolution depending on the density.
That's a good, yeah.
Or
Yeah.
area to be higher.
Yeah.
So for it to be meaningful.
Yeah. Thanks. All right. Any other questions? All right, now we can have some fun. Let's play with some tools. All right. Yeah, the mouse is not visible. I take that on my PowerPoint. I don't see a mouse anywhere.
Okay.
Oh, wait.
Wait.
Yeah, let's try doing this. Let's see if it makes it. It's gonna be a problem. Let me let's try doing that. Oh, let's kill the PowerPoint. So PowerPoint's the problem. It's okay. I'm just trying to figure out where I can't even see where the mouse is. Oh, there we go. Okay. There we go. Let's close that and then share. Okay. Oops. That's not it. This one. This one. There we go. Okay. All right. So this is our NJADAPT webpage on the Climate Change Resource Center's website. So you can see when you come here, you can access all of our tools directly from this page. We have our climate dashboards, our NJ flood mapper, our climate snapshots, our NJADAPT. We've also incorporated what we call our climate planning tool. These are actually some ArcGIS story maps to help explain flooding, like a flooding primer, understanding what the flooding risks for New Jersey are and how we actually deal with visualizing those. And then there's also one that kind of walks you through some GIS assessment steps. So if you want to use that flooding data to do like a parcel level analysis on your own, we have a little like walkthrough story map. You can use that as well. And then our NJ4 adapt. I'm just going to kind of jump into some of these and show so you can get an idea of how they work. This is our climate dashboards. You can see on the top here, we basically have the different types of climate data that we currently have incorporated. So we have mean seasonal precipitation, mean daily maximum temperature, average daily minimum temperatures, mean cooling degree days, growing degrees, and heating degree days. So these can be a little complicated. Cooling degree days and heating degree days are a measure of how much energy it requires to either heat or cool kind of a standard residence to 65 degrees Fahrenheit, given the outside temperature. So obviously on hotter days, you have more cooling degree days because you need more energy to basically cool that place. And so as you come down here, we have some explanatory text. If you want to learn more about a specific measure, we have info boxes about that. We also have links to where the data comes from. And you can look at either a chart, and I believe we do have some embedded maps, but these are being worked on currently and being updated to be a little more easier to read. But for the graphs, you can see basically change. Precipitation is one of those things that you don't see really an increase or decrease over time, but what you do see is a lot of variability. So because it's really an unknown. If we switch to like maximum temperatures, we can look at a specific time period. So we can go out to like mid-century. We can look at both a moderate or high emission scenario. And we have an info box to kind of explain those. A moderate emission scenario is basically if climate conditions continue to occur based on current global policies with no change. A high emission scenario is if basically we see an increasing amount of greenhouse gases being emitted into the atmosphere in the future. And so you can kind of see how if you switch, how that kind of changes the tail. Oh, sorry, we're actually in winter, which is why we're not seeing a huge amount. You can change the season as well. So you look at summer, you see a much bigger, much bigger jump. But the graphs are interactive. So as you hover over, you can kind of see what those values are. Like I said, we have some descriptive text here. We also provide kind of a overview, kind of with the minimum, maximum, and averages for the period you picked. So you can kind of see what that looks like. As like I said, these are meant to just kind of provide statewide averages. We're going to also include something on sea level rise, and the heat wave data is going to be incorporated into one of these as well. Flood Mapper, like I said, is kind of one of our flagship products here. So Flood Mapper, basically, it's an interactive mapping application. We have on the left-hand side here are all your kind of functionality tools. The top left here, we do have a little menu where you can access, like so you can access the map services if you're a GIS user. We also have links to all the data sources. Is that being cut off a little bit? Yeah. The data sources. So any of the data sets that are on the tool, you can find the original source of that data set to use for yourself if you want or learn more about it. On the right-hand side here, we have our layer control. So you'll see as we add data to the map, it populates on that side and allows you to kind of make some modifications to it. Our map layers is where we have all the different assets, population, different types of data sets you can add. So we have infrastructure facilities, transportation, environmental hazards, Martian open space, social vulnerability data, data on municipal property loss due to flood insurance claims, land use land cover, and then we also have what we're labeling as our OEM. This is basically all the data sets that are incorporated into our NJADAPT that you can incorporate into NJ Flood Mapper as well. So for instance, we can just do something like adding facilities. We can look at like hospitals across the state, just to start with. And then our flood hazard is where all of your flood hazards are. We have our total water levels, which go from 0 to 20 feet. We have sea level rise, which comes directly from NOAA, which goes from 0 to 10 feet. We also include the sea level rise mapping competence, so it shows you, areas where there's high versus low confidence in terms of those sea level numbers. And this is our inland inundation, so you can see we have from 1 to 15 feet. And this is kind of a bathtub model approach. So for each riverine area, it basically shows that additional flooding. We'll be incorporating those climate-based ones, like I said, shortly. We have data on the Sandy surge extent, just to kind of visualize the impacts from Hurricane Sandy. Data sets on hurricane slosh inundation modeling for category 1 through 4 hurricanes, and then the FEMA flood zones, which provide the 100-year and 500-year flood zones for the entire state. I just want to show the total water levels tool so you can get an idea of how that works. So when you first come into it, you can actually go through the interactive version, which walks you through step by step. Or if you're kind of a experienced user, you can jump in and just start making whatever data selections you want. But as you walk through it, gives a little introduction, explains. We have a little video that explains what total water level is. Like I said before, we have our current highest high tide level, what the new highest high tides are expected to be due to sea level rise, and then what does a flooding event that would occur on top of that sea level rise look like. And so it walks you through step by step. Your first step is picking the geographic area that's closest to the area of your interest. So we could say select 5 for Philadelphia, say we want to look at Camden to look at some of the impacts from tidally influenced river flooding. Then again, it asks you to pick your climate scenario that you're interested in. So you can go between a high, moderate, or low emissions. This is being updated because low emissions is basically out of the cards right now, as far as according to the climate people I've talked to. But you can look at either moderate or high, and these are going to be updated based on the new CMIP 6 data, I think it's called, the news climate model data that was just released within the last few months. So we can stick with a moderate emission scenario. And then you select your planning horizon. So depending on what your purpose for this is, what's the time period you're interested in? Are you looking at something that's mid-century, like 2050, 2060? Or are you looking maybe for some type of a project that you want to look at long-term impacts out to 2100? You have that flexibility to pick the time period of interest for you. So let's pick 2090 for now. And so then based on your selections, it gives you your estimated sea level rise. And so with sea level, it's a model data set like everything else. So there are different probabilities of different levels of sea level rise occurring. And so we provide those here on the left-hand side. everything from the most likely, like a 95% chance of it occurring at least at that level, down to the least likely, at less than a 5% chance of occurring. So I believe DEP, they recommend using a 17% chance for most of their planning efforts. But if you were, say, looking at, placing some kind of critical infrastructure like a electrical substation, you might want to be planning for the most unlikely event just to be safe. So we'll use the 70% chance, since that's what DEP typically uses. We also have a little link here. This provides the sea level rise estimates for the entire state of New Jersey and gives all the different probabilities of the different levels of occurring if you're interested in seeing that. And now we can pick our flooding event. So we can either go with no flooding event. We just want to look at sea level rise itself in terms of like what the high tide would look like. Or we can look at an annual storm, a 2-year storm, a 10-year storm, or a 100-year storm. You can see the different increments that would provide for this specific location we're looking at. And then, like I said, we have historical flood events. So we can look at, we have specific nor'easters that go back to like 2012, Hurricane Sandy and Irene. I have a graduate student now working to collect data on more recent storms within the past few years. And we're going to be incorporating that into the tool as well. So for Camden, we can say, let's see what a Hurricane Sandy event would look like. And so in this case, it's 3.93 feet. It's going to add on top of our sea level rise. And then finally, it gives you a summary. So it shows your selections. It gives you what your total water level estimate was, in this case, 8.3 feet. And since we only have the data mapped at 1 foot increments, it rounds it up or down to the nearest foot. And you can simply say add to map. And you'll see it adds that to our map. And then we can like zoom in, like, so we were looking at Camden specifically. You can zoom into this area of Camden. And we can basically see the areas that are expected to be inundated under this scenario. Like I said, here on the right, you can see our layer controls. You can quickly open the legend if you want. You have the ability to turn specific layers on and off, temporarily, or remove them entirely. You can also change the transparency or opacity of the layers. So as you add lots of data sets on top of each other, you can kind of change that so you can see them more easily. Most of the mapping layers are interactive, so you can click on a specific location and get all the attribute information from that location, pulling directly from those data sets. So it's an interesting, like I said, there's a lot of different ways you can use this tool. One of the things I mentioned earlier, you can also get to the climate snapshots directly from here. We've also integrated a project that was done at Rutgers called New Jersey MyCoast. This is a project that looks to incorporate crowdsourced information about flooding events across New Jersey. It is statewide. Let me see if I can zoom out so we can get some of those. Let me turn this off. Loading. I don't know if that one's loading today. Basically, what it provides you those, there would be points where you can click on where people have taken photos of flooding events in that part of the state. You can actually see the photos, and it'll take you to a specific page on the MyCoast program where you can see basically what the flooding conditions were under that event. You can change the base maps if you want to look at satellite views, you want to look at topography, you can pull those in. We also have the ability to save, share, and print the maps. So you can, if you're creating a map and you want to be able to use it in your presentation or share it with others in a report, you can actually select to print the map or create a map image or a minimal view that you can then take a screenshot of and easily embed it into your presentations. And like I said, we've also been working on bringing in external data sets. So this allows you to basically grab a URL for a map service from, say, the New Jersey Geographic Information Network, which I happen to have open here. Since this is given the conference while I'm not here today, I figured we'd look at some like statewide trails. And so you can actually go down, you just go to their API resources, you hit the copy button, and whoops, we'll come back in here and just paste it in. The only thing I usually do is just delete those at the end. You basically can pick the URL. It basically says, yep, I was able to find that and the type of layer it is, and we add it to our map. And it pulls it directly in. And then, like I said, they're still interactive, so you can click on a specific trail, you can get the information from. This one, of course, is unknowns. But you can basically pull in external data sets that may not be available in Flood Mapper, and then again, overlay the flood information on to see, okay, what's potentially at risk here that we may not want to look at further. Any questions about Flood Mapper itself I can answer?
So Flood Mapper, I mean, the coastal flooding, but the riverine flooding, is that now?
So we have the hand data for, so we can add, like, say, we can look at 6 feet of riverine flooding, and we can add that in. And
so when you add, like, you showed Kansas City,
yep,
you were just showing.
That's just from sea level rise. Yeah.
But then you layer on top of that, the water that's coming in from the water sitting there. Is that cumulative or will it,
That is probably one of the biggest open questions in research right now in terms of flooding impacts. So it's easy for us to do the coastal, and we have some models to do the river, but the areas where they basically intersect and combine, it's very difficult to model because you have this like basically push and pull type effect in those areas. And it's kind of a big open-ended question in the scientific community. When we were developing the hand model and we had the scientific advisory panel, this was one of the things that came up. And everyone's like, yeah, we don't like, we maybe have models to look at this at a very local scale, like in very specific things, but to do it like at a statewide level is still not easily done. Yes, it is. So that's one of the things we are working with some of we have some new engineer hires at Rutgers who specifically look at a lot of this stuff, and we're trying to work with them to figure out like what can we do to try and quantitate that impact and be able to visualize it.
So is what you're talking about perhaps like the intersection of tides and rainfall flooding where?
Yeah, so what we have during like a hurricane event where basically you have coastal surge pushing up river from the coast, but then you have a torrential rainfall where you have water basically flowing down river, and you have these things basically combining, and basically with the tides and stuff is a very complicated thing to model. But it's what we are experiencing basically with every storm event that comes up. Yeah. Yeah, so I know there's also some efforts to look at, when possible, trying to pull things like satellite data. Like I know with which hurricane was it? One of the recent storms, I think in the last couple of years. Can't remember which off the top of my head. But for whatever reason, we actually had satellite passing over New Jersey like the day after the storm occurred and like right after. And we actually have pretty decent like satellite imagery to show like the extent of flooding from the event. And so trying to use stuff like that to help kind of understand, okay, yeah, this is really what we're talking about in some of these areas in terms of flood impacts. Yeah. Yeah.
Really interesting to look at it today.
Yeah, the biggest challenge is like the satellites only fly over at specific time spans, and then you're usually with hurricane events, you're dealing with cloud cover, so it is all kinds of difficult things to.
So the hand model you do have.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not the +3.
So that's no. So the +3, like I said, we're working on that with the newest version. I'm literally ready to send it to DP next week to have them evaluate it and just. Yep. Yeah, we'll be pulling that in. Yeah, and that's going to be incorporated into everything. So what we're planning on doing, since we know this is an important tool for a lot of the township planning efforts, we're going to pull it into our snapshot tool, so it'll be able to see like for different types of assets, which ones are in and out of the FEMA +3 as well. So it's going to be kind of added into all of our tools as an analysis layer.
You think that's like months?
Yeah, probably a few months. I mean, I'm just in the process of hiring a new data scientist for our team. So this is going to be one of their first tests when they come on. It's going to be basically taking this and incorporating it into everything. So I'm hoping by the end of the year, it'll be incorporated basically everywhere. Yeah. Anything else about Flood Mapper? We can look at a few others. Yeah, sure.
So is the hand the same as the riverine?
Yeah, so hand is they call it high above nearest drainage. So when we consider rivers, they're basically drainage for rainfall that comes in those areas. And so what we're looking at is that basically the flooding increments above that river level. And so you can look at it, like I said, from 1 to 15 feet of additional flood level. So the interesting about this, if you do look at like some of so we have river gauge data available throughout New Jersey. If you look at it from a specific storm event and see at what height, did a specific river in your township achieve, you can then basically plug it in here and see, okay, this is basically an estimate of what the total flooding would have looked like from that event. I'll just quickly show the climate snapshot. So like I said, climate snapshots basically take, in a lot of cases, the data and stuff that's available in Flood Mapper, but allow you to basically have a pre-canned analysis for your location. So we can look at, something like, oops, you can look at that Camden County, the Camden we were looking at. Camden City, you pick your municipality. So we have basically, like I said, a built infrastructure report, a critical assets report, a natural working lands report, public health report, a vulnerable populations report. We also have a disability profile report, which just gives you an indication of the disabled population within your community. And then we also have the forestry reports I was talking about, as well as far as Forest Adapt. So, you can come in here like our critical assets, so you can download a PDF of the report or the data itself, gives you a little introduction with a map of your area that you're interested in, and then provides information about the exposure. Either if you're a coastal community that's impacted by sea level rise, it provides you exposure to total water level. in addition to FEMA flood zones. If you're in an inland community, it will only give you the FEMA flood zone information since that's all that's really relevant to you. But you can basically see for the different ones, different types of assets, what's impacted by 100-year storm, 500-year storm, or 2 feet and 7 feet of inundation. Nice, and they're interactive graphs here. All the charts, you can click on a little menu up here and you can actually export them as an image file. So if you want to use one of the charts in your report, you can do that, or in a presentation. You can also download an Excel file that actually just have the data from that chart. So you can make your own pie chart or something like that if you want, a bar chart. And then we have, oh, these did not load today. But we are supposed to have embedded maps here. I think my programmer's in the middle of updating all these with new data because we just added the 5 feet as well. But the buttons here will basically link you back to Flood Mapper with all those assets preloaded and the flood level you selected preloaded. So you can basically go in and start exploring the data and figure out what's actually at risk and which ones across your state. We can jump to some of the other reports just to kind of show you some of the other data that we have. So the built infrastructure is the same as critical assets, just with different types of facilities. Our natural and working lands one gives a little bit of a different analysis. Oops, I ran out of the state. Let me go back. We can do this one for, let's do Warren County and see what we get. So it gives an analysis looking at specific types of land uses across the state and their impact from flooding. So in this case, it gives you information on wetlands, on open space, beaches and dunes of your coastal community, agricultural lands and forest land. You can see the total acres within the geographic area you selected, and then those that are impacted either by a 100-year flooded zone, a 500-year flood zone, or within a regulatory floodway. And then we have basically the maps as well that you can link to and the data sources. For the coastal ones, we also have some data on coastal erosion, so beach erosion, things of that nature. And then the other one that I just want to show quickly is the social vulnerability, or vulnerable populations report. And so this one, we did a little bit of an extra analysis on this. So one of the challenges when looking at demographic data is that the demographic data is typically at a census level, whether there's a census tract or a census block group. And so when you're trying to think about the impacts of flooding, when you're looking at a census tract, you don't really know where the population is located within that census tract, whether or not they're actually impacted by flooding or not. So what we did was within each of the census block groups, I believe, across the state, we actually pulled in the DEP's land use land cover data to look at where is the actual urban land uses within those block groups and how much of that urban land use is actually impacted by flooding to try and then estimate the impacts on the population itself. So we provide that analysis up front here to kind of show you what the proportion of those areas that are impacted, some of the urban area impacted by those floods are. And then we basically go into, this actually is taking data from the CDC Social Vulnerability Index and using the same categories and variables that they use for that. So you can look at, say, for Warren County, we can look at the total population that's below poverty, what percentage of the total population that is, and then rough estimates on the number of people that are within the different flood zones based on that factor. So we have this is looking at kind of socioeconomic status. We have data on household composition and disability. We have data on minority status and language, and also on housing and transportation. And so you can see, looking at things such as mobile homes, or the census has a variable called overcrowding, where you have more people living in a household than there are rooms within that household. So you can look at some issues such as that as well. Houses with no vehicle, where so if you're in a high flood area, having no way to possibly evacuate. Group quarters, things of that nature. And then we have links to some other data sets that are related to social vulnerability. We include things such as the United Way has what they call an ALICE data set. It stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed Households. It's basically a measure of working poor. So people are just barely making ends meet. They may be specifically vulnerable. So you can understand what the proportion of population of those within the state as well. Oh, wait on time. All right. That's what I'm going to jump into is Forest Adapt, because I think this group might be specifically interested in some of the data on here. This is one of our older applications, so we are in the process of revamping the whole thing and getting it into a newer mapping platform that's a little more user-friendly than the original one probably was. So with this one, you can begin by, we have different data themes that you can start with within Forest Adapt. So you can look at, we have a bunch of different modeled climate data. We have climate-associated risks for forestry, forest stand and carbon characteristics, species distribution and future projections, county forest statistics, which comes from the USDA's Forest Service Forest Inventory and Analysis Program, land use and forest cover, pest and disease risk, as well as other risks, including things such as, like I said, fuel hazard for wildfires. This has to be updated. There was a damage agent range data set that was made available by the feds. It has been taken down and has not yet been ever put back up. So we're probably just going to take this down entirely. But we can jump in and look at, say, something like climate associated risks. And so in this tool, like I said, it's on the left-hand side here is basically where you can jump between those different data themes. And then within each one, we show, what you can see. So we can look at things such as, in this case, heat zones or plant hardiness zones or land surface temperature, and we have them for different types of return period, different type of climate scenarios and time periods. So we can look at like a moderate mid-year. Like I said, these are primarily regional data sets. We can turn on the county overlay just to see where New Jersey is with that, and then the legend. But basically, it allows you to see like what the plant hardiness zones are and how they're expected to change due to climate change, so you can understand, what are the risks for, certain types of plants. We may be thinking of trees or species. We might be thinking about planting in a certain area. Are they going to be able to survive given the, the changes in temperature that are expected to occur? So we also have stuff on forest stand carbon characteristics. So you can look, this again is a regional data set. We can look at total forest carbon above ground, below ground, understory, standing and down dead, and basically get ideas of basically the total forest carbon within those different areas of the state. And this is a pretty decently detailed raster data set. It's not the highest resolution, but you can kind of, that did not work. That's why I hate using trackpads. They are the worst. Let's do this. Let's jump back here. And now it zoomed my entire web browser. There we go. Sorry. Some of the other data sets we have in here, like I said, the land use and forest cover. This is where we have our canopy cover data sets and our impervious cover data sets, as well as the land use land cover data for the state. So if we look at the canopy cover, let's see if I can get this to zoom in without effing up the browser completely. Apparently, oh, there it goes, just taking a while. So this is impervious cover. So you can see here, based on the legend, this will show you the percent of the area that's impervious across the state. And so you can use that, and you see some of these you can see pretty detailed as you go into, like, say, Trenton area. Yeah, like I said, the resolution is not horrible, but you can kind of see like neighborhood level impacts from impervious cover there. If we do the canopy cover, see if we get this to load now. I think the servers are just being a little slow today. It's Saturday. Yeah, it's not going to load. One of the other things people find useful sometimes is the pest and disease map. So we were talking about ash trees earlier today. We have a data set on emerald ash borer. That's good to. This one I know takes a little bit to load. There we go. And with this one, you can basically see, different parts of the state, the amount of basal, they call it basal area loss, but amount of tree species loss due to that specific pest or disease. So in this case, emerald ash borer. So you can see those. We have a bunch of other ones that, Dutch elm that was mentioned earlier. We can add this one in. And basically these are regional data sets, but they can kind of show spatially where a lot of that's expected to occur. The only other one I want to show is our projected species. So this one definitely you want to look at more regional level. It basically allows you to look at a scenario. It gives you what they call a sorry, the name escaped from me. Basically a suitability analysis for that species within that area based on the climate conditions. And so you can look at current day, or you can look at out to 2100 for the two different climate scenarios. And so you can either see the total suitability, or you can see the change in suitability that's expected to occur. And then you can pick between the different either conifer, maple, beech, or birch, oak, and hickory. But you can look at something, say, pitch pine. Zoom out a little. Oops, and there we go again. So I can slowly zoom out without. So it's a little easier to see there. So you can see basically the areas of pink are areas that are deemed to be not suitable for that tree species under that scenario where that change is occurring, and the greener areas where it's expected to be more. So in our case in New Jersey there, we have the New Jersey border, so you can see that. So on our pine barrens, it's expected by 2100 it's not going to be very suitable for pitch pines anymore, which can be a bit of a problem considering that's like one of the primary tree species down there. But this can allow you, like I said, if you're thinking about tree plantings, this can allow you to think about, okay, what's going to be suitable in the future that we plan out that's going to potentially survive or not. Like I said, we do have our county reports. So if you look at our different reports, so if you can go to, let's do Warren County and select a municipality. What's a good one? We can do Hackettstown. Let's see what Hackettstown looks like. We can do our municipal forestry snapshot. Similar to our climate snapshot, it provides data showing basically the different percentages, the tree canopy coverage average for the municipality, the urban canopy cover, and the total impervious surfaces. And then we also did an analysis looking at the tree canopy cover by urban land use. So you can see where the majority of your canopy cover is located in terms of whether it's in residential areas, industrial areas, commercial areas. You can see that breakout both for the municipality as well as the county as a whole. So you can kind of see how your municipality kind of stacks up against the county as an average. And then we also just showed that here, it shows the breakout of the different urban land use covers within your municipality. So you can see that for reference. We embedded a map here of the canopy cover for Hackettstown, so you can see that as well. And then the land cover types basically showing breakouts of those, the breakout of the different upland and forest and wetland forest based on the type of tree. And then we have overall county statistics. So for Warren County, you can see a lot more detailed information about the proportion of different tree species types across the county, the size and age classes of those trees, just to kind of put into some kind of context. The last thing I want to show you guys before we break. So this is what is coming out. You're getting a little sneak peek. Will be coming out, I believe, sometime in October. This is what we're calling our New Jersey Public Health Adapt. Like I said earlier, it works similar to the snapshots where you can pick a specific area that you're interested in. So we'll do Hackettstown again just to keep it local. And you'll see here we have basically 5 different reports: the climate conditions that impact health, existing health conditions that potentially would be exacerbated by climate change, our heat vulnerability index, environmental conditions and exposures associated with negative health outcomes potentially exacerbated by climate change. That's a mouthful. And sociodemographic factors at greater risk of negative health outcomes. And so for each of these, you come into them, like I said, they are downloadable. So one of the data sets we have is our land surface temperature. So we can see here, based on the legend here, you can see in July, this is what the land surface temperature was, July 2022 for Hackettstown. And you can kind of see the areas that are high heat. And if we go down to our heat island analysis, you'll see all those high heat areas correspond to the areas where we have a lot higher impervious cover than canopy cover within the town. And so this can be, useful as a planning tool to understand, okay, what can we do to help maybe mitigate some of those factors? We've also incorporated our county-wide heat wave data. So you can see that there as well. So the average number of heat waves currently, the average heat wave duration, and the maximum days of a heat wave duration. So you can see the historical and then how that's expected to change under different scenarios. We've also included some projected climate data. So how many days above 95 degrees Fahrenheit are expected within the area, the max temperature in July and how that's expected to change going forward, and then those cooling degree days I mentioned earlier. We've also started incorporating the data from that extreme precipitation tool that we've been building. So you can see for a specific type of storm event, the current amount of rainfall that's projected to occur under current conditions and then versus under climate change conditions in the future, and see basically how that, how much more rain we're expected to get from those types of storm events. And then we've included the FEMA flood zone data. So you can see the flood zone areas of Hackettstown. We do have this is our older FEMA plus 3 feet incorporated in here. So you can see like the additional area that adds with that orange yellow area around the FEMA flood zone. But this will be updated with the newest one once we get the sign off from DEP on it. So that's our climate impacts report. There's also existing health conditions. This is pulling data from the CDC's National Environmental Public Health Tracking Network, and basically provides estimates for the locality on like the prevalence of things such as asthma, COPD, coronary heart disease, obesity, smoking, things that could basically be contributing factors to having negative health impacts from climate change and people who may be specifically at risk. We also have our heat vulnerability index, which will show for the town. Hackettstown is actually not very high, mostly because they're not at high exposure in this northwestern part of the state. If you look at the statewide map, you'll see a lot of the more southern and eastern areas have a much higher risk of exposure because of the urban areas. So while the Northwest New Jersey may have a higher risk in terms of their ability to adapt to climate change or with their capacity to handle it, the exposure level, thankfully, is not going to be very high. But from here, you can actually click to get to an interactive map that allow you to basically, statewide map where you can basically zoom in on whatever areas you want and get, like I said, get the specific data for those areas. Refreshing. So you can click on a specific area within a town and get a little thing showing the group indicators, how each one contributes to it. It explains those, and then it actually goes in and can give you the breakouts of all the different factors that went into that. Environmental exposures, we include data such as we have data on average daily traffic loads that can contribute to air pollution within the locality, measures on ozone, particulate matter, which I'm assuming this data only goes up to 2018 after the summer we just had with the wildfires in Canada. I'm expecting to see some spikes in that with the future data when it becomes available. We also include that heat island analysis with the overburdened communities. So you can actually see in Hackettstown specifically, some of those areas that are at risk of heat island effect are also considered overburdened communities within this by the state. And so there may be people particularly at risk. And then we also look at specific sites that could be impacted by flooding that could have an impact on health, such as no contaminated sites, soil contamination deeds, solid waste facilities, things like that, where flooding could potentially cause leaching of things into the groundwater or into the riverways. And then finally, we have our socio-demographic report, which again gives breakouts of the socio-demographic factors in the community. So specifically looking at things like people under the age of 5 or over the age of 65, even those specifically over the age of 65 who might be living alone, people with at least one disability, unemployed, foreign-born, people below the poverty line, people have indicated they speak English less than well, different types of specific difficulties such as ambulatory or cognitive, people who work outdoors for a living who may be specifically at risk to say heat, and people with like things such as no health insurance or living in group quarters. And we also give a breakout based on the race and Hispanic ethnicity of the population, understand how that may impact any type of communication or messaging. And then we also have some household data, so looking at things such as houses built before 1960 that may, or 1980 and 1960 may not have things such as central air conditioning or maybe particularly at risk, overcrowding, no internet access, things of that nature. So this is meant to be released hopefully in the next few weeks. We'll be doing a public press release about it, so you can look forward to that and getting to play with that as well. So I'm going to stop there because I'm holding you from lunch. So are there any other questions? I'm also happy to hear, like, please, if you have any feedback, if there's specific things that you guys need in your daily work that would be really useful in terms of like understanding climate change impacts on open space or, things of that nature, ecosystem services. We'd love to hear from you because we're always looking for new areas to kind of expand, our projects into.
This is great.
Thank you.